Archbishop, we're approaching Lent, and all of us lead frantic, busy lives, and you're asking us to take time to slow down.
I am. That's one of the main points in the pastoral letter. But it's a means, it's not an end. And it's a means for using or responding to the invitation in the pastoral letter is that we use Lent to get closer to Christ. That's the heart of what I want to say. But we have to make space, and therefore we have to slow down a bit. And that's important.
But in today's world, when Christianity seems to be suffering so much in terms of its credibility in the secular world, why should anyone want to get closer to Christ?
Because he is the way, the truth and the life. He's what makes us happy. And you must remember, of course, that this is a pastoral letter addressed to Catholics in their churches. And what I want to try and do is make sure that for them at least, their faith kind of taps down into some of the rich soil. I heard a lovely phrase the other day, that we suffer of something of a broken chain of memory. So we have all sorts of things in our memory about what feeds our religious life, but sometimes they've got disconnected and they're just floating around. So for example, rosary beads become fashion accessories. They've kind of lost their roots and things are commercialised almost. So this is an appeal to people to link up again some of those chains of meaning and chains of memory and get ourselves a bit more rooted in what lasts and what is not simply ephemeral and passing.
I appreciate it, the pastoral letter is addressed to Catholics, but there are many people such as myself who nevertheless still try and live our lives by spiritual principles and like to use Lent as a time for reflection and for getting closer to non-material things that matter. And how can we do that?
Well, I would suggest you use exactly the same things, given an adjustment that you might wish to make, as I'm commending to Catholics, because at the end of the day, our shared interest in what is best for humanity. And, I would call myself a Christian humanist. I'm deeply committed to the human project, but from a point of view and with the light of what Christ gives. So, Ruth, if you can slow down a bit and find a little bit of space each day, and find that space interiorly as well as just in your timetable, and use that space to get in touch with what is deepest in you, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a good thing to do humanly, and it will bring you closer to God.
But it's not just a question, is it, of getting in touch with what's deep in me, but with God as well. So, presumably you believe in God as a transcendent entity. But
Augustine said in that wonderful book of his Confessions, that God is what is deepest within me. He said, you were within me and I was not. That he himself was living on the surface while God was dwelling deep inside him. So if we're going to meet God and meet ourselves, we have to find that space to go deeper within.
And what if we look within and don't like what we see?
Oh, there's no doubt if we look within we won't like what we see. There's no doubt about that at all. And again, to quote Augustine, he says, but you have seen me first. That God has already seen and already knows all the waywardness and all the ambiguities of my heart, and yet he still chooses to be there, to welcome me to myself.
To think of practical things that might aid us in this spiritual quest, Lent is often focused on eating, for example, or not eating particular foods, and what tips can you give to aid?
Again, in this pastoral letter, I say there is a long tradition in the Catholic way of life to give up meat. Now, some people don't eat meat anyway. I love it. So for me, on the Fridays of Lent, because Friday is the day on which our Lord died, then I will not eat meat. And I will use that prompt each Friday just to open my heart a little bit more to the reality of his death on my behalf, out of love for me, and just try and be a little bit more aware of it. Now, it mightn't be meat. It could be other things too. I try and set myself the project of not drinking alcohol during Lent, but that's hard because I do enjoy a glass of wine. But I'll try. I'll give it a good try.
Do you give up chocolate?
There's three things I try: alcohol, butter, and chocolates, and I love all three of them. And I'll probably make excuses like, well, Sundays aren't really part of Lent, so I might indulge a little bit on a Sunday and then start again during the week. But again, while clearly it might help me lose a pound or two, that's not the purpose of doing it. The deeper purpose is to remind myself that what I want is not the most important thing. And it's much more important that I want what God wants of me, rather than I persuade God to kind of satisfy what I want for myself.
We always allow ourselves a major relapse on the chocolate front on Mothering Sunday.
Well, there's all sorts of good reasons to make excuses, and there is a lovely traditional phrase about a Catholic. A Catholic is somebody who knows both how to fast and how to feast. And that's why we have feast days as well as fast days. And I hope we do both wholeheartedly.
And what about fasting then? Because I find it actually easier to fast for a day during Lent than to give up chocolate every day.
Yes, I agree with you. And again, Fridays would be a prompt in that direction. The big fast days for us are Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. So the beginning of Lent and then the day in which we remember and recall the death of Christ. But fasting actually in the laws of the church is not that rigorous. It means you limit yourself to one full meal a day and the rest are just snacks. Now that's actually how a lot of us will live anyway.
Now, often during Lent, church leaders such as yourself will use the discipline of Lent to try and encourage Christians to focus on a particular issue of injustice in the world. Is there anything this year, with so much going on in the world, that you would like people to meditate on?
Well, I think more than anything, I would ask people to focus on displaced people. And I mean, we see that now perhaps most dramatically on the borders of Libya and in some of those areas in North Africa and across that part of the Arab world, which is going through such remarkable experiences. There was, just recently, I read a piece by an Egyptian journalist who said, what is it that causes people to stand up and face the threat of bullets? It's religion, but not only religion. It's hunger, it's not only hunger. In the end, she said, it is their inalienable dignity that will not be affronted any longer by the tyranny under which they have to live. And it's to see the cost that people will undertake in order, as it were, to defend their dignity of themselves and of their people. And I think when people lose their homes over that and flee and are left with a suitcase or left in 10 days in an airport or perhaps semi-permanently without a home, then I think we realise the importance of the dignity of every person. And then that, for me, is a short step from going and saying, yes, and it's for that dignity that Christ was homeless and died on the cross.
And anything in this country that is of particular concern to you at the moment?
Well, I think there's no doubt that in the aftermath of a banking crisis and a recession, there are people whose lives are getting harder and harder. And I think it's right and proper that if we have foremost in our minds a commitment to the common good, then the concerns of those people are very much in the forefront of our minds. That's a separate question from how we best cultivate a society in which there's greater social responsibility. What this is caused by is an economic recession and some financial irresponsibility, which has to be corrected. But I would urge again, as we bishops did at the end of our last meeting, that those who make decisions about where cuts are going to fall, whether they're in local government and local government are making those decisions, or central government, they must have a particular concern for the weakest and the most